This
Board
conference will now be recorded.
to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. First item is to discuss the formal agenda. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda? Do we have any questions, any comments? Okay. We'll go ahead and move forward to our topics. The first topic is the appointment of Board of Property Tax Appeals members, BOPTA members. That's on page 4. And I'll turn it over to Tracy Kravenko, our clerk.
Thank you, Commissioner. So before you tonight is just to discuss the appointment of the Board of Property Tax Appeals members. So pursuant to ORS 309.067, county governing bodies appoint 2 pools of individuals by October 15th for each year for the that we can select from to work the BOPTA appeals. So we called for applications on August 10th, and the deadline to submit that was September 3rd. And we had a total of 3 applicants this year. Greg Friedman, David Ozer, and Clark Powers. All 3 of them have previous experience in serving on the BOPTA board. Commissioner Toyoka was designated to serve as the office holding board member at the January 27th, 21 work session during the liaison appointments. So the term of each member shall begin on the date of appointment and shall end on June 30th, 2022. I've attached the applications for your review, and I'll be back at the next meeting for the appointment at that time. Any questions?
Any questions for our county clerk? Okay, so we've got 3 applicants. Commissioner Toyoka is going to be our liaison on the BOPTA committee. Thank you so much. And now, is this, do we have a total of 3 vacancies, or is this? The
minimum to serve on the board is 3. So
okay.
I will probably be looking for you to appoint all 3 of them along with Commissioner Toyoka at the next board meeting.
Okay, sounds great.
All right,
thank you. Questions? All right, thank you, Tracy. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the fee waiver request for Smith CUP appeal application. That's on page 11. Our Community Development Director, Gail Henriksen, is joining us. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to her.
Thank you, Chair. Again, for the record, my name is Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. The item on the work session this evening is to discuss a full or partial refund of an application fee in the amount of $3,170 that the applicants paid to appeal a decision of the hearings officer to the Board of Commissioners. The board did hear that appeal on August 25th, and they did vote to affirm the hearings officer's decision and to deny the appeal request. Per the budget policies that were in the adopted budget for fiscal year 2021-22, application fees are to be designed to the fullest extent possible to capture the cost of services that are provided in conjunction with that permit. When the applicants originally appealed the director's decision up to the hearings officer, they paid a $250 fee. That $250 fee is set by state statute. It's ORS 215.416, subsection 11B, and the county cannot increase that fee. If you note in your agenda item for today, staff did prepare a table that summarized the costs of both the original appeal up to the hearings officer and then the appeal from the hearings officer up to the Board of Commissioners. To carry that appeal forward just to the hearings officer, the costs associated with that were over $3,000. So obviously, the state statute and our budget policy are in conflict there, because per state statute, we cannot fully collect the costs of that initial hearing and appeal. And so the fee to appeal the hearings officer's decision up to the board is intended to reflect and recapture those costs that the taxpayers have, the taxpayer money was used for in bringing that forward to the board. All total, the total amount between the hearings officer and the board hearing was $3,919.41. The questions that staff had for the board tonight at your work session is, there are two of them. First of all, does the board want to consider a fee waiver or reduction of that $3,170 application fee? And if so, what direction does the board have for staff regarding the amount of that reduction? And then if the board does determine tonight that there should be a reduction or waiver, we would bring the item back to you again on the business agenda at your October 6th regular meeting. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Gail. Was the appellants, I guess, were they aware that they might see a cost like this or a bill like this at the end of this appeal?
Yeah, the fee is required up front, so they knew going into the process that the initial fee was $250, and that if they made the decision to appeal to the board, there was a $3,170 fee.
Okay, so they knew about the $3,000. Okay. Any questions for our Community Development Director? Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this could be seen as a matter of arithmetic of fiscal accounting and responsibility. The amount was clear at the beginning for the cost to appeal. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Just to reiterate, just to really pound that nail in. Well, so the idea is the real cost of everything is always paid by somebody. And in this case, the appellants knew that there was a cost. They paid the cost, and now they're saying they shouldn't have to pay the cost because we have somehow made mistakes in what the amount of the fees are. Do I get the gist of their arguments properly then?
The arguments that were cited in their fee waiver request related to the fact that the two of the appellants are nonprofit organizations that are involved in community issues, and also that the county does not have any type of sliding fee scale, so that if you are appealing a case, whether you're appealing a case that deals only with one specific property, or you're appealing a decision that may deal with 100 acres and 100 residential units, the fee cost is the same regardless of the scope of the appeal.
So the real cost of everything is always paid by somebody. We incurred costs to taxpayers to process this. And if I look at it, they're not being charged everything that it cost. So in a way, there was a discount. To ask to have a sliding fee scale would require the kind of discernment about the deserving and the undeserving in my mind. And I think that's a slippery slope that we don't want to get on. And I don't see the logic of saying because an appellant has a particular tax exempt status, that would grant them the right to be entitled to a fee waiver. I'm curious about what my colleagues think about this. It's in my neighborhood. I know some of the folks involved. I may have personal bias that doesn't occur to me. I think I'm being fair and objective, but I'm curious, what do my colleagues think about this?
I would just make the comment that I don't think it matters whether you're a nonprofit or an individual property owner bringing this. I think that I don't find that argument compelling. Commissioner Toyoka.
As I read through this, I had the same opinion as if you were cited the fees up front, made your decision to appeal based upon the knowledge of having that fee structure, you represented an organization, whether it's profit or nonprofit, knowing there's a fee structure for an appeal, unless, you know, it was already stated ahead of time, or if there was already in writing a policy that to discern profit, nonprofit, or anything else, I think the fee structure is the fee structure, period.
Commissioner Bangs?
I'm right there with all of you. I really feel like if there was a request to modify the fee prior to this process and that we were discussing it prior to this process, but I agree with Commissioner Toyoka. You went in, the group went in with their eyes wide open, knowing what the fee was. And I don't like, I agree with also Commissioner Quila and Commissioner Thompson. I mean, being a nonprofit doesn't feel like a compelling enough reason, especially when you knew the fees prior to this entire process. So,
Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, I guess my feeling is that that asking the rest of the citizens of Clatsop County to absorb an action, to absorb the cost of an action that these folks are taking that is very specific to a really very small piece of property in the county. I just find that that's not fair for the rest of the citizens of the county who pay fees and have to absorb this. So I would vote against this.
Sounds like we're all in agreement. Do we have any other questions or any other direction needed?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move.
Commissioner Quila, you went on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What I don't know even where I ended on there, but I appreciate it. It sounded like we're in agreement. Thank you, Gail, for your presentation. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the comprehensive plan update. Goal 5, background report, new policies, recommendation memo, and policy questions on page 61. And I'll turn it back over to our community development director.
Okay, thank you. We met previously on August 11th at a work session to discuss the topic of Goal 5. And during that work session, there were a lot of questions raised by the commissioners or questions about questions. We didn't actually get to the question stage itself. And the discussion at the work session really centered around the fact that Goal 5 is very complex and very broad, and the commissioners wanted to have the opportunity to be able to ask more questions so that in the end, staff could compile those questions, gather the information, and then come back in a series of work sessions to work through the topics in Goal 5. So with that, I know that Commissioner Bangs, the county manager, and our planning manager held a meeting on August 19th, and I have a copy of Commissioner Bangs' comments and questions. And I also did have a brief conversation with Commissioner Webb this afternoon with some questions about Goal 5. But since we haven't had the opportunity yet with the county manager to meet and discuss some of those questions so staff can prepare the information and come back to you, we wanted to take this opportunity this evening to give the commissioners another chance to bring forward questions that you may have for staff, not to resolve any issues or come to any conclusions, but just so staff can understand what you would like to know so that I can come back better prepared to you in the future with some answers. And with that, I'm really just going to open it up for commissioner questions and comments for me on Goal 5.
Anybody want to jump in with questions on Goal 5? There we go, Mr. Thompson.
You know what? I'm going to start with praise. When I looked at the policy, at the framework of the questions that you provided for us, you know, I thought this is the kind of work that we want to be doing. I had a conversation with Cheryl Johnson, who was part of the first comp plan. Now we're looking at the next comp plan after 40 years. Well, hooray. The framing that you're doing is important because this is the foundational work. So I'm going to let other people talk about their specific issues. I just want to compliment you on the results and the process so far. Thanks.
Okay. Any additional questions, comments? Commissioner Toyoka.
Well, I'll broach the question, say the whole, the more research I do about safe harbor and the objectives of that, just, it just seems way too all encompassing, and, it does not address whether it's current or specific conditions on the ground. It seems to me, if you can please explain if I'm wrong, but it seems very generic, and it might include areas that shouldn't be included, and it might miss something that should be. It just seems like such a too big of a broad brushstroke. Am I reading that wrong, or am I correct on that one, Gail?
Yeah, it is definitely a very broad scope of looking at things, and it is not necessarily site specific or site specific. So you're correct.
Okay, so to me it looks like if we're looking at these different, if you want to make a policy, then a safe harbor would not be a good avenue of approach because it is too broad reaching, and it's not site specific, nor is it regional specific. So that, like I said, everything I read, it's just too broad of a brushstroke for policy making. I don't know how anybody else feels, but
I'm just going to weigh in real quick. I think I relayed the experience from Warrenton last time we talked about this, when we started a safe harbor approach and we scrapped it for some of those very reasons, Commissioner Toyoka, and we ended up doing more of a site-specific evaluation. It was more in-depth and detailed and cost more money, but in the end, it certainly was more satisfying, even though nobody was extremely pleased all the way through with the outcome. It was certainly, I think, much better received than a safe harbor approach. So I would agree with that. I saw Commissioner Banks, Commissioner Thompson, and Commissioner Webb all had your hands up. So we'll start with Commissioner Banks.
I would agree with both of you. I prefer a more analytical and scientific approach rather than a broad brushstroke. So I do like the further, deeper, more specific versus what very much feels like a wide scope. So I feel like in the future that might help us minimize potential losses, I guess. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Thompson.
And I agree with that. I think we need to be exquisitely precise. Here's what I don't understand. How do we define wetlands when there is such variation? I mean, I understand it's not just about where there's water, it's about where there's aquatic vegetation. We see trends, we see changes over time. How do we provide certainty about what people can and must do in regard to wetlands when we have a changing landscape? I can't wrap my mind around that, and I do want to be scientific. I do want to be precise about it. Can somebody help me with that?
I would just make one comment too. It's not a wetland until it's delineated in most cases, and delineations only last 5 years and they have to be renewed. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that when you have a document or comprehensive plan or a goal 5 that's many years old, keeping it current is an extreme challenge. And once we started it in Warrenton, we didn't have that 5-year renewal really as a barrier. We were able to do that inventory and feel fairly confident that that's what the wetlands were. But now it's much different because you do have a renewal process for each delineation every 5 years. Commissioner Webb, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I, as usual, kind of come down in the middle of this. I think that this is not an issue just about wetlands. This is an issue about riparian areas as well, isn't it, Gail?
Yes, so it would deal with wetlands and riparian corridors,
Right.
yes.
And riparian corridors tend not to change very often. I mean, obviously, we've got the situation at Big Creek right now where the corridor has completely decided to be something new, but that's very, very rare. And I'm thinking of the issue of our staff. I think that, I think we should always be seeking to make our staff determinations as easy as possible for the staff. And in riparian areas, especially where the costs are very of encroachment, can be very severe. They're habitat related, often they're fire related. And so I think that there's a way that maybe we could straddle this issue by talking about riparian areas and buffers and other constraints. I'm also concerned about the loss of I'm sorry, I'm operating on about one cylinder here. There are issues of tree removal, all kinds of other factors that happen in riparian areas. And so I think it's much easier to do to make rules about buffers and things like that in riparian areas. I understand the problems in wetlands, which are constantly changing, et cetera. But in wetlands, Gail, do you always have to bring DSL or the Corps in when you make a determination?
Yes, when a permit is submitted and there's wetlands identified through the statewide wetland inventory on the property or potential wetlands, we're required under state law to send a notice to the Department of State Lands, and then they have, I believe, a 30-day window to determine whether or not wetlands are there and whether or not a permit would be required by the property owner. But we do notify DSL every time that a permit comes in where there are potential wetlands.
Okay, because I remember in the appeal when Walmart was taking over a whole lot of wetlands when they were building in Warrenton, that the Corps of Engineers was involved in it. Was there a reason for that? Mark, do you remember whether, why the Corps was involved?
I would first of all characterize it wasn't a great deal of wetlands because it was about 1/3 of an acre, and it was about of the size of Costco's mitigation project that was necessary for their development. Corps was called in. Corps is always going to be called in because they are the federal arbiter of wetlands, and I think in this case there was an appeal and some concern, some other issues with regards to the Skipping-On River and some of the drainage, stormwater drainage. A number of things that were going on there, and I think that kind of precipitated the Corps' involvement.
I see. But usually it's just DSL. Is that what we think? Yeah. Okay. Well, and as I say, I just would like to simplify the work for the staff in terms of how to deal with applications that come in with wetlands on them. And I know that sometimes that determination can be really expensive for the owner of the land or the potential owner. So I would just like to say a word for simplifying the staff's job and for and maybe separating out riparian areas from wetlands would be the way to do that.
I like Commissioner Webb's approach. I think that it is important to make these distinctions. I also think, ultimately it is the state that's going to have the stay. I would hate to, I don't know how much discretion we really have on some of these issues in the long run. Even with riparian areas, Gail, do we have a great deal of discretion with riparian areas?
If it's outside of areas that are being covered under Forest Practices Act, then yes, we do. But if it's in an area where an activity is occurring that's under Forest Practices Act, it's going to default to that.
Commissioner Bang?
Gail or Director Hendrickson, don't we also have ORS laws on the books in regards to farming practices? I'm almost positive that we do, but without Googling it, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there are right to farm laws as well, and I'm not familiar with them enough to say what those requirements are, though.
I just, with regards to riparian zones, I'd like to just default to the state on their current rules and regulations. And if there's any zones outside of the state's umbrella, then, you know, maybe we'll just need to take a look at them individually. I don't know.
Well,
Commissioner Webb?
yeah, I would say that there are many riparian areas that are outside of forest lands in Clatsop County. Throughout, I mean, just think of every creek and river that flows through the county, and many of them are not in forested land. So it's a way to be able to say, you know, within riparian areas, and we do we have the right to do that. I mean, that's something that counties do all the time, is to stipulate what can happen in riparian areas. So that's something we have control over.
Thanks, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, what I hear from my colleagues, and check me if I'm wrong, we're eager to balance here. We want to balance and harmonize. We want to have a flexible, adaptive, currently accurate system insofar as possible that makes best use of staff time and taxpayer and developer money. Is that what we're after in terms of the desired end product? And I don't know if that provides the necessary support and direction you're seeking, Director Henrickson, but that's how I'm hearing it. Because we want to be fair to everybody, and we want to protect, whenever possible, the landscape and the critters, all of them, furred, finned, all of that, and allow appropriate development. So it's a balancing act, right?
Commissioner Bangs?
I 100% agree with it. It is a balancing act. I think my only issue is I'd like to default to somebody who has a little bit better of an educational set than I do in this discussion. Like, I don't know whether or not 50 or 75 feet or 100 feet is better. I mean, I'd like to default to ODF and W or ODF rules and regulations. I mean, that's just, they have the expertise, I don't. And so if we're going to get into a discussion about riparian zones and what we should be doing on you know, county lands or lands not owned by, you know, not under the Forest Practices Act, I'd just really like to default to somebody who's a little bit more educated in that topic than myself.
We've got Commissioner Webb again, and then Commissioner Toyoga.
Yeah, I think this is that, for instance, I mean, I agree completely with Commissioner Bangs. And it's one of the reasons that when we do a comp plan, we seek people who do have knowledge of environmental and other local land conditions. And their riparian standards especially are pretty easily definable. I think that DSL or whoever it is, has a whole system of the width of streams and what riparian protections should be offered and for what distance. So there is a science to this that is very well known, and I think it would be fairly easy for us to tap into that.
And just to comment to that, I think that in Warrenton, there were 25, 50, 75, and 100-foot barriers that were put into place. And I think that it was easy to kind of see the logic behind where that determination was made based on the metrics. Any other? Commissioner Toyoka, sorry about that.
That's right. Yeah, just, it's fun. I was researching this, especially trying to get more educated on riparian corridors. And the one thing that stuck in my head was that it was a transitional semi-permeable membrane was what a lot of the ways it was defined. And so, so they further explained that, yes, riparian corridors they act as like a buffer, a membrane for the waterways, but they do shift over time and they are movable. So yes, I agree with Commissioner Bangs. We need that authority to make those definitions as those areas, same as wetlands. We need somebody who can actually define those, inventory them, and, but we just can't make arbitrary safe harbor approach and say, this is all good, or this is all bad. It needs to be identified and cataloged.
And then Director Hendrickson, some of the other questions that you needed direction on was, do we want to move forward with the adoption of the Arch Cape local wetland inventory, which apparently utilizes safe harbor regulations, correct?
No, it does not. So in the hierarchy of how wetlands are reviewed and inventoried, the National Wetland Inventory, which was in effect for many years and just recently replaced by the statewide wetland inventory, was very broad and based off of aerial photos that were maybe not 100% accurate. About a year and a half ago, the state adopted the statewide wetland inventory, which is more accurate than the national wetland inventory, and it's based off of soil types. The local wetland inventories are even more accurate because there's more ground truthing, but maybe not 100% ground truthing. The only way to be really clear about it is to have a wetland delineation done for your specific property. So in the hierarchy, the local inventory is much more accurate than what we would use here in the planning department. And if there is one that is in place, we default to that because it's usually more accurate than the information we have.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 94 of our packet, in regard to item number 2, the Southwest CAC's position, they want us to adopt the local wetlands inventory, but bullet point number 2 in the central column, the inventory is 10 years old. Recent DSL approved delineations for privately owned parcels in this area have revealed discrepancies between the local wetland inventory and actual ground conditions. Well, given a choice between a 10-year-old inventory and a current delineation, referring to what the planning director says, it seems to me it makes more sense to go with the more immediate delineations. It's just better science. But again, I'm curious what my colleagues think.
I see Commissioner Bangs.
I mean, I would agree with that. I'd be hesitant to adopt anything that's already been proven false in certain situations. So, I mean, that's just, my personal thoughts in regards to it. I'd be hesitant to adopt something that isn't, current or correct or true.
Commissioner Toyoka?
I was just gonna say, this is actually we previously talked about it in concept of, safe harbor versus actual. Well, now we have a scenario where they give us an actual inventory on the ground where we have a newest delineation, and we should not adopt safe harbor because the delineation, the new inventory says it's not applicable. So I think that's kind of proof in where we should hesitate in, looking at safe harbor approach for everything just because of an example like this, where an old inventory does not prove out.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. I agree. Commissioner Thompson?
Well, and I'm one of the ratepayers of the Falcon Cove Beach Water District that helped pay for that delineation part of it. And, you know, I don't want to waste taxpayer dollars, but here's the deal. This is one of those things where we're going to have to keep investing money. It isn't one and done. And so the more accurate, the more precise, the more current we can make it, I think that's just the cost we have to pay for doing business and paying attention to the planet. So I tend to agree. I don't think safe harbor works.
Commissioner Banks?
I guess, you know, to follow that up with climate change and everything occurring, I mean, I want to do the best job for our constituents. And when things are changing, I feel like 10 years ago isn't accurate. Things are so different now. And I feel like and I agree with Commissioner Thompson. I feel like we need to do a good job for the people of our county and just try to continue moving forward and getting the most update information.
Sounds like we're kind of all in agreement with that. Next is, does the board wish to include any of the Wetland Advisory Committee's recommendations on Goal 5?
What page are we on? I'm sorry.
I happen to be looking on page 94 or 95 of the packet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Am I correct in going there, Community Development Director?
Yes, you are.
Okay, Commissioner Webb?
Well, I just have kind of another question that it would be, why aren't we going through this sort of in a, you know, beginning at the first page and ending at the last page kind of way? I think it would keep our conversation more focused on what the issue is that we're talking about, rather than bouncing around. Does that?
I was just actually following the policy questions or the draft 1 future needed board direction, and those were the 3 items that I was bringing up. So I'm just kind of going one by one through those. But if we want to hit any other topics, I'm happy to do so. Let's stick with this right now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Unless we don't have enough information to provide direction. Does anybody have any questions on this? And maybe Gail can maybe further, you know, spotlight this.
Yeah, so for some background information, probably around 2014 or 2015, the county set up an ad hoc advisory committee to look at the issue of wetlands and a lot of the items that we're dealing with today. Should there be buffer requirements? What were to be considered significant wetlands? Were there areas where we thought wetlands were present and weren't? And so a committee was established to look at all these issues. And in 2017, the committee did come forward with 4 final recommendations that they presented to the board at that time. And the board received the recommendations but never took any further action on them. And during our discussions with the citizen advisory committees, several members who were either involved with that process or followed that process as it was going on brought those policies back up. And so knowing that they are developed 4 years ago, we wanted to bring the issue back to the board to see if there was an interest in either having another presentation, because we never have enough presentations, but getting some more information about those recommendations, or if there was any questions about them or any interest in learning anything more about them, or if you just wanted to say, thank you, we heard from them in 2017 and thank you. So.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm in favor of hearing from them because I agree. We need another presentation on this because it happened 4 years ago and that was a different board composition. It was definitely a different leadership. And so for us to be refreshed, but before they come to us, if they could convene and see if there's a way that they could take a look at their work and say they need to revisit it, or it stands and can go forward, given the changing nature, what's the same and what's different. So have them look at that. This is my idea. Have them look at that first, and then when they're ready, bring it before us. And then I think we can respond, because I really want to treasure and make use of the wealth of information that our interested community members and that capable expertise. Let's absolutely honor it and use it whenever possible, but let's make sure it's fresh, current, and scientific.
And I would just add, I look at these committee recommendations, I think they're actually worth exploring. And I would like to learn more myself about the density or development rights transfer program that they discussed, and certainly the methods for low impact development and reducing setback standards. I think those are things that are worth kind of probing a little bit more. Commissioner Banks?
I think just to follow up, yeah, I feel like it's worth probing a little bit more, but then I also want to figure out, is it feasible? How much would this cost our county? Do we have the staffing? Do we have the capacity? And so in all of this, like, I agree, I would love to know more. And then just also explore, before we commit it to a document, that it is something that the county can actually follow through on.
Okay, any other comments, discussion, questions? Sounds like we'd like to hear some more about what the advisory committee had recommended. Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Toyoka.
Yeah, and as we do that, if you want to go back to the advisory committee and say, hey, please revise, look at, readjust, please provide them feedback from what we were saying today. Our thoughts and about, the different approaches, the ages of the data, the current science versus old science. So let's just kind of give them the agenda, meetings of what we discussed about this, so they have that information going forward in their discussions.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Webb.
I have gone back and reviewed the video from the CREST presentation that I wasn't able to attend last week, and I guess I thought that presentation was going to be more specific to the fact that CREST, I understood from Ms. Hendrickson, is doing a project specifically for Clatsop County related to wetlands. Gail, am I wrong about that?
No, you're correct, Commissioner Webb. We contracted with CREST last fiscal year to do an update to the Duncan Thomas report. The Duncan Thomas report was done in 1983, and it was the foundational document that we used to designate Goal 5 wetlands. So it's obviously quite old, but we have now a draft, revised, updated document there. I did also want to clarify while I'm on speaker that our Wetlands Advisory Committee hasn't met in over 4 years. I can try and round up the members, but I'm not sure if any of them are still interested or even available at this point. But I did want to make clear that it may not be that easy to reconstitute the committee.
Is there a written report from that committee?
I don't believe that there was a final report other than the recommendations that were presented to the board in March of 2017.
Even seeing that might be useful to us.
Okay, and I can get that information.
Any other questions, comments? And then Gail, I'll turn back over to you because I skipped right kind of to the direction given. Is there anything else that you'd like to have us cover?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you. I just really wanted to make sure that if there were requests for information from staff, that I had them all collated and can come back to you with some answers at a future point. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And good discussion. Commissioner Thompson?
I want to particularly love on this Clatsop County Watershed Map. This is the kind of information that's so helpful and so relevant. It gives us specific, relevant, science-based, but place-based information. I just love that. Thanks for that.
And if we don't have any other comments or questions, we can take 15 minutes maybe. That's the first time we've had 15 minutes in a break for work session to regular meeting. And we'll reconvene here in just a few minutes. Thanks, everybody.
I apologize if my dog starts snoring and you can hear her, just saying.
Hello.
My dog is overjoyed because she got to eat at something other than 2 hours after dinner time tonight. So thank you all very much. She appreciates it.
Do all the commissioners have dogs? Yep. Not in the Aquila house.
You have little kids. You don't need
Yeah,
dogs.
that's plenty.
Dogs, goats, cats, bunnies,
Oh
All I
my.
can, all I can say is,
kids.
Chair Quayla, just wait. Your time's coming. So
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Once you
Yeah,
say yes, it's a downhill slide. Downhill. Fast. It's all started with a fish. I'm just saying, it all started with a fish that the cat ate, but you know.
We're holding off as long as possible. We'll see. Okay, Commissioner Toyoka.
So we came down from Alaska to Oregon with a container carrying a goldfish named Bird. Just saying.
And that was the start of it. Nice. Well, I see we have 6 o'clock, actually 6:01, so let's go ahead and get started. The Board of Commissioners, as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, is now meeting in regular session. Teresa, can the roll call be taken at this time?
Chair Quila,
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson,
I'm present.
Commissioner Toyoka,
Present.
Commissioner Webb,
Here.
Commissioner Banks.
Here.
Thank you, Teresa. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Thompson would move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll move into our first item, which is the public health update. And our public health director, Margot Lalich, is joining us. I'll turn it over to Margot.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I was just sorting through some of my notes and thought, oh, I'm just not very organized at this moment, but I do have an update for you. You know, things are always changing, but generally speaking, I just want to again recognize, you know, really the exceptional collaboration in our community, and it's reinforced. Every community has its challenges, its differences. And as I listened to my colleagues over the last couple of days, where there's fragmentation, broken communication, overlapping, I again just commend all of our community partners throughout this pandemic. For the most part, it's really quite seamless. And again, your support makes that possible when you're together supporting all of us. So thank you for that. Just a couple general updates, and then I'll quickly go over where we are with testing, vaccination, and cases and guidance, because schools have been a big focus this week and will continue to be for a little while. We are having alternating week press conferences with public health and the hospitals, and then also today was our first press conference with the Director of Northwest Regional ESD, Elizabeth Friedman, our superintendents, and public health. And again, you know, these conversations could be, one could approach them with a bit of apprehension, but it's really, they're always a pleasure just to be able to sit and share conversation, hear about the experiences of the different school districts. They shared that they will all be over 90% vaccination as we inch up to this timeline. They will, not all, but some will lose some staff. They're working on that, but people are getting vaccinated, and we're all really focused on keeping kids in school, so I'll get to that. I was looking at some of the data before I joined you, and looking at, positivities, and our highest in our county at one point was like 30%, and that was the beginning of like the Delta variant and that rapid transmission. And, yesterday it was 4.5%, right? So what is that a reflection of? It's a reflection of the guidance. It's a reflection of an increasing level of herd immunity, right? We're at over 73% have their first dose of vaccination. Of all the counties, we're usually in about the top 10 in terms of our how high we are with our vaccination rates. So I think that's something to own in terms of everyone's efforts. But also testing is, it's the protective measures we have in place. And then the fact that, people are vaccinated, and then some people are vaccinated have also acquired COVID through the Delta variant, and so they do have a very high level of immunity. So again, I think it's important to recognize where we've been and where we are, and that we'll probably see some fluctuations going forward. As far as testing goes, we're still at Camp Rylea. It's running very smoothly, although we're going to relocate to a new site at Camp Rylea. Those winds just really rip through Camp Rylea, and we've had some, we work with tents with the National Guard, and also just to protect the workers outside when they're with the cars. And despite all the reinforcements, we have lost our tents a couple times. And so Camp Rylea is looking at relocating us at the officers lounge, where I don't think they're gathering anymore, but they actually have a drive-through awning there. So Tiffany's working on that for us, and that will be a very good and protected place for the winter. We're still doing there about 30 to 60 tests a day. And, we're averaging there about a 10% positivity. We're testing a lot of kids right now as well. I did ask for, in our daily reports from the testing team, to start including, just out of curiosity, how many are vaccinated or not, because that is a question we do ask. It's kind of overall fairly inconsequential, but it's just a curiosity on my behalf. The expiration date on the PCR kits have been extended again. What does this mean? It means that when we look at those who are quarantined, and right now I'm really going to focus on those in school, right? And some critical infrastructures, but those in school, the mandated or the recommended quarantine is 14 days. When the local public health authority was given the option of a 10-day quarantine back in August 6th, we supported that. I supported that. We want kids in school. We want people to be able to return to work. And again, they're asymptomatic, right? So, but the second part of that is they could return to work, return to school, if at 7 days they're asymptomatic and they test negative. That does not include an at-home test, and it's asymptomatic, so it's a PCR test. So we're not flipping that switch tomorrow. There's an important component of communication. What are our supplies? What can we anticipate receiving going forward? But I would expect by next week, we will be able to shorten that quarantine period that much more, which will get teachers, potentially healthcare workers, students back in school sooner. So I'm looking forward to that and being able to communicate that out when we have all the T's crossed and I's dotted. Vaccination, we have the approval or the guidance for the boosters for 65 and older, those with underlying health conditions, again, healthcare workers. But again, we didn't start vaccinating with Pfizer until April. So what does this mean? It's going to be a little while before we're vaccinating that population, and it's not a huge population. And remember, when we started the vaccination campaign, it was primarily public health vaccinating. We have now many more sources of vaccinations, about 5 or 6 for Pfizer in the community. So it's good for the public. It's good for those who choose to get that booster dose. We also are waiting for the guidance and approval for that 5 to 11-year-olds. Yesterday, our public health team met for 2 hours, and we had a planning session about vaccinating both populations and looking at that 5 to 11-year-old group as well, how we want to partner with the schools, making sure that we have the right people coordinating the different components of that outreach effort as well. So I think we're prepared and we're just waiting for the green light, and I'm sure some things will happen and change in between that green light and where we are now. Monoclonal antibodies, we're starting to get more questions. I mentioned to you previously that Lisa McLean, Tiffany, Chris Lehman, Julie Owens from Providence, we all met, we discussed this as an option, but we're not there yet. The distribution of monoclonal antibodies now will come through OHA, similar to vaccines. There's a limited supply. In my meeting I was in yesterday, they said about 47% of the current allocation in Oregon will go to FQHCs and tribal communities. The amount that Clatsop County will receive between the 2 hospitals is fairly limited. Don't quote me, but I think it was somewhere around 24 doses. We briefly touched on it this morning on our vaccine task force meeting that meets once a week. But we're going to continue planning. And so look, we will reconvene next week and see what that looks like, where it will be located. Again, we're talking about Camp Rylea and setting that operation up there, but it's a different operation than vaccinations. I know that the MRC down in Tillamook County, they're supporting the monoclonal antibody administration. They're doing that in partnership with the Adventist Hospital. So we'll get a little bit more information about what their process is as well. And again, we have more cases. You know, a lot of focus is on the school setting at this point in time. Schools are overwhelmed, challenged, confused. I have a big heart for school nurses and all that they have to deal with. You know, they have hundreds of patients every single day. And so we're working with them and really have a commitment. And we had a conversation internally this morning. And then again, I had a separate conversation with the superintendents today after our news conference of just how do we, you know, best ensure that our children are healthy and ready to learn, that they're in school, because so much was invested in the excitement, the elation, the anticipation of returning to school. How do we take what we know historically around managing communicable diseases in the school setting and apply that to COVID, which is endemic? It's a pandemic, but it's endemic, right? And it's going to be with us. We don't know what it's going to look like in the future, but there will be something else in the future. There always is. And so how do we approach this with common sense, using the best evidence that we have, and yet make sure that children miss the least amount of school? Our superintendents know what they're doing. They've been planning for this. They had kids in school last year. They want kids in school, and our superintendents are doing a great job and their staff. And so that's where our conversation is going is, yes, here is this guidance that we're receiving from OHA, which quite frankly, I think is going to get more complex. And take that and as a collective, again, through that collaboration and communication, and say, what is reasonable so that we can manage the educational setting, create as much stability as possible for students in those households. Because when students miss school, it affects households, it affects employers. And so that is really my priority over this next week is making sure that we have a reasonable plan that works as well as it can for everyone. And I think is really about what is fair and just in the context of the situation. So that's my update for you. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
Thank you, Margot. And I know from being on a number of meetings with you over the last few weeks, I know this has been your focus all along, to work with school districts and to try to find a pragmatic approach to keep kids in school and learning in a safe environment. And it has always been your focus to try to keep kids in school and keep schools open. I see there was a letter today that was asking about quarantine guidelines and whether we are the ones that are setting that for county school districts. And that is the current policy a 14-day quarantine? Did you mention that, or is it now a different? And I saw you already addressing this.
Yeah, I responded to Ms. Ulbrich. So the investigative guidelines are recommending this change. It was a mandate, and then it became a recommendation on August 6th to quarantine for 14 days. The local public health authority has the authority to opt for a 10-day quarantine. I opted for a 10-day quarantine. That has been our message. That has been our communication. And it's, I mean, we're communicating, and we have been far and wide and all that, including providing that guidance for superintendents as they're preparing their back to school presentations. So somewhere in the midst of it, there was just, I think, a miscommunication, or someone maybe hasn't been as much a part of the conversations, and it was misunderstood. So I communicated to all the superintendents, just providing that clarification, and of course apologized on behalf of public health for any misunderstanding. But I didn't hear back from any of them, so I think we're on the same page. We usually are. I think it was just a blip. I do, though, like I said, want to go move as much as we can towards that 7-day option as well, right? 3 days is a lot of days to miss school, especially right now. And just for clarification for some of you that may not understand this, the way the current guidance is being interpreted and also translated for us by our epidemiologists. In fact, we have a call just for Clatsop County Public Health and both ODE and our regional EPIs on Friday. Part of it's about outbreaks, but if a child, say grandma, is positive for COVID and that child lives in that home with grandma, and that child can't isolate, which is often the case, grandma has that 10-day isolation period because grandma's sick. The child's not vaccinated, so they have to quarantine for 10 days. Grandma's fine. She's like, 10 days are over, and then Uncle Bill comes and visits. Uncle Bill's not vaccinated, and while Uncle Bill's visiting, gets symptomatic, tests positive. That child has to start another 10-day quarantine. So you can see the cumulative effect of that. It's not reasonable. I mean, I just like, there's no way I'm going to pull a child out of school for 20 days waiting for them to see whether or not they develop symptoms when we have so many other barriers and protective measures in place. It's not my decision to make alone, but I think this is going to be one of the hard conversations we're going to remember as a community about how we go about deciding risk, right? And when we look at the data and we look at kids at school and all of the protective measures that are in place, and there are many to protect them, as well as staff now being vaccinated, because if you remember early on in the pandemic, part of the concern about opening schools was the fact that you had so many unvaccinated staff who had chronic illnesses, and they were so vulnerable to what kids could bring into the school. It's a different scenario now. It's changing. So I'm not comfortable with serial quarantines for children. For many of them, school can be the safest place for them, right? Where they get their nutrition, they get their education, there are other eyes on them. And so I think we have to be very sensitive with how we proceed, but we have to start having a conversation about this.
Thank you, Margot. I know that's been your approach all along, and I appreciate your clarification. I think Commissioner Thompson, you were first.
Thank you. man, I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings. We were at the AOC District 7 meeting on Monday, and Gina Nickel from the Association of Oregon Counties said there is talk among urban legislators that they want to take over our public health departments in every county and pull them into the state. They're the state legislature. I guess they can do that because they can make the laws that would have that happen. When I listen to your reports at every meeting, I'm reminded of what a terrible idea I think that would be. I don't know if you've heard about that. I don't want to cause undue concern on anybody's part, but I want to alert all of us in Clatsop County that we could be at risk of losing the authority that's so dear to us and so essential for the health and well-being of our people here.
I haven't heard anything in that regard. There are states, including I was just working in one where there is a state public health division, and then there are regional practices. There are other states like that as well. It's hard for me to imagine public health restructured that way, but as we know, there are some counties that have turned over their local public health authority to the state currently to manage that. So,
well, we haven't, and we're glad, and we don't want to. I'm pretty sure about that. Thank you.
I have a hard time fathoming OHA taking on more responsibility than.
Yeah.
Commissioner Webb? Was it Commissioner Webb? Did you have one, or was it Commissioner Tioka? Commissioner Tioka.
I just wanted to, thank and applaud, Director Lalich and, the activities with your office and your efforts keeping our kids in schools. I've been talking to some mental health professionals in our area, and to me, the numbers of K-12 students that are having, mental health issues because of this is, to me, as a parent, staggering. And keeping them in school, keeping them engaged is so critical. Not just the education part, but keeping our kids engaged for their own purposes and their own health is critical. I fear that if they try to lock down our kids again and keep them out of school, it's going to have a generational effect. It's not going to be a short term, like an illness would be curable. The mental aspects could linger and have a long-term effect on them. So I appreciate and applaud the efforts that you and your staff are doing to keep our kids at Clatsop County in school. So thank you.
At the press conference this morning with the superintendents, there was a question asked about, the masking, how's it going in the schools? And, it was consensus among them, those kindergartners, right? And I was just listening to that. It's normal for them now. They just go to school. They're used to the mask. They go to school. It's normal for them to go to school wearing a mask. Like, I can't imagine that, right? We didn't do that. And so many other things that will be part of, I hope that this is temporary, right? That they're not spending their educational years masked, right? That's kind of a horrifying thought to me. But and I was just like, this is what's normal to these children now, right? To mask, to hide half their face, right? And so I think, while it's easy, we don't think about it because it's what we're seeing all the time now. I just don't want to get too used to that, and I don't think that we should. We have to accept it for right now, but not get too used to it or complacent.
Mr. Banks?
Thank you for acknowledging the masking and the children as well. It's just because, I've, as a teacher, noticed the impacts in social and emotional growth, just because they don't have the physical cues of each other. So they don't know if they're upsetting a friend. They can't see it. And so I notice that on just a daily basis. So I appreciate you acknowledging that, that we hope and pray that this is temporary. I did have a question in regards to booster shots. I have a bit of a concern, that our teachers were the first to be vaccinated. And is there any research or any actual numbers in regards to like when those protections from those vaccines will start scaling back, and then we're going to have to push out a booster in order to keep these kids in school and to keep these teachers healthy?
Right there, I think there's two parts to that question. One, and I just want to say at this point in time, there's no mandate for boosters, right? And there's no booster mandate. And so in terms of, it's really about antibodies, right? And there's a lot of surveillance and testing going on around antibodies right now over time to determine immunity. And for those who are vaccinated and, develop and acquire COVID and develop an illness, I'm sure it's all random sampling, although there are a lot of voluntary clinical trials going on in many different places. I know someone who's in one at NIH right now. And that's all I can tell you about that right now. I'm not actually reading the studies on how Pfizer is determining the threshold and antibody levels to indicate, that 6 months is better than 8 months. I would say that that decision would not be made without good evidence, and so that's all I'll say about that right now, but I can do a little bit more homework for you.
Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed to hear the elected officials and senior staff who are here give all of those anti-mask, anti-vaxxers the ammunition that they so love. I don't think that wearing a mask for 2 years is going to change the life of a 6-year-old. I'm sorry, I've had a couple of 6-year-olds in my life, and I just don't think that would happen. And I don't like this public message that I'm hearing here tonight. I really don't.
I think one thing I would like to bring up was we saw a letter from Mayor Balancy for the city of Warrenton, and he was writing the governor about the vaccine mandate and the impact on the volunteer fire department. And I saw a letter from, actually a kind of a report out from our sheriff about his discussion with the Clatsop County Fire Defense Board. And I thought maybe we could let the sheriff kind of discuss that real quick.
All right, thanks, Chair Coyle and members of the board. Yesterday, I did attend virtually the Fire Defense Board meeting, during which time each of the chiefs was asked to report on what their anticipated losses were going to be in their departments due to the vaccination requirement. I provided those details in my email to you, but the general theme is that our rural fire departments are probably going to face significant reductions in service, where I'd say arguably we need them the most, because response times are already long, just by the nature of being spread out geographically. And so, some departments might not be able to respond during the day. And I think that's a real risk to the well-being of the community. And I personally, if I was suddenly critically ill or seriously injured, I wouldn't care what someone's vaccination status was if they're coming to save my life or help me.
Any questions for the sheriff, Commissioner Banks?
I just have a basic question. At what point, because I'm a planner, and I was looking at Henry's number, or not Henry's numbers, but the sheriff's numbers that he sent me, and here in Warrenton, I'm responsible for over 100 kids during the day, and seeing that much of a depletion, seeing over 55 as a lowballing loss across our county and EMS services, EMTs, and fire. It actually makes me kind of nauseous sitting here thinking about that and thinking about the children that thinking about the children that I am responsible for throughout the day, not only my own children, but you know, hundreds of other families. So at what point as a county, I guess, do we start planning? For me, I think about this as I don't want hope to be my plan. I don't want hope that this is going to change or that these numbers are going to change to be my plan, because I don't feel like that is a responsible planning method that we should have as commissioners and as basically leaders in this community. And so, like, looking around, like, what do? I know in wildfire situations, we do states of emergency, and then therefore we can request outside help. So is that something that we can look at as a, sorry, this is emotional for me. Is that something that we can look at as a county in order to make sure that our rural and our constituents are served? Is that a method that we can look at as a county going forward?
Isn't that where the county manager stuff? Yeah.
So I think this is a concern, obviously, Chair Coyle, members of the board, that we've been hearing from a lot of rural and frontier counties. And what is particularly problematic for many of us is the fact that we rely upon volunteer-centric services. And so those volunteers, you know, they're not making the same choice that folks are if this is a livelihood decision. And it's not something that they're making lightly either, because they know that their services are critical for their communities. And so I think that there's a number of options that the county can be looking at, and certainly declaring an emergency is an option. What the issue then becomes, though, is that who, what, and when would there be resources to come in and actually assist in those critical areas? And I think that's the wild card. And our approach throughout this pandemic has been, you know, let's be planning, let's be mindful, let's be pragmatic as we go through that. And so I think we will look at all those different options that fall within those categories as a path forward. So the sheriff and I and our emergency manager and others will get together and we'll talk about what maybe some of those options are. At the end of the day, though, is that, you know, is that providing these essential services is more important than anything else. And, you know, if you live in a rural area, you're already waiting quite a while for any 911 first responders services. And, you know, to the sheriff's point, at that, you know, you just want someone to show up. And that's what governments do. You know, governments show up. The sheriff's office shows up when you need the sheriff's office. And so we are going to have to wrap our collective heads. This is a statewide issue about, you know, what the proper responses are. And so, you know, we will put that diligence in.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, County Manager. I really appreciate that reassurance, and I trust you. I mean, as we talk about it, the governor mobilized the National Guard to come and help in hospitals. But what that did was release medical personnel to do medical work. That's not the same as mobilizing first responders. So I don't want in any way to question the governor's authority to do what she does. I'm not interested in that. She's the governor. She's the top elected official. By golly, she gets to do that. On the other hand, we need to advocate effectively for our people with a solution. So I'm grateful you're going to do that, and I'm eager to hear what it is, because this is really scary. Thank you.
Just one point of clarification. I know that the National Guard here at Columbia Memorial Hospital are not clinical. They're actually filling positions in environmental services, nutrition services, and some of the ancillary and support staff positions at the hospital. And I appreciate our sheriff and county manager comments. I mean, this is a challenging situation for so many organizations throughout our state dealing with the implementation of the mandates. I gotta say, I come down on the other side of this. You know, I really I see those first vaccine task force clinics that we held, and we had healthcare professionals and first responders all showing up for those in great numbers and getting vaccinated, and so happy to do so, knowing that they're in positions, critical positions throughout our county, and they wanted to be safe and protected. And, you know, I read this letter that we got tonight from a constituent who we all read, you know, basically telling us that COVID isn't killing anybody and vaccines are responsible for deaths, and, you know, that we're feeding everybody lies. There's a big conspiracy about healthcare and government, you know, and if people in our community are listening to that and they're not getting vaccinated, and then they get sick and they're in the hospital and they end up ultimately dying, which I've known several that have, and I think we all do. I think we all have family and friends that have died and they didn't get vaccinated. You know, I want to see as many people get vaccinated as possible to prevent that. And I am thoroughly saddened by one individual that just passed away that was a member of my church for many years and my accountant, and didn't get vaccinated, and now he passed away, and his family is mourning his passing. And I think it's unfortunate that was a preventable death. So it's a challenging circumstance, but to say that, you know, the debate is balanced and that, you know, you have to believe one side, I just think that the facts on one side are wrong. And I don't mind saying that. And I think that we need to be able to say that. So I appreciate what our public health department is doing. And it's, I know that Margot's, it's been a tireless job. You've been doing so much for so many different entities throughout our county. And thank you so much for the good work you've been doing. Appreciate it.
Sure. Chair Quirla, if I might just sum up just real quickly. You know, I think that our approach through this whole thing has been really focusing on the public health component of the pandemic response, and we've embraced, you know, all the best practices, and we've been, you know, very active in working with our partners and really educating folks so that they can hopefully have the information that they need to make decisions for themselves and their families. What is always the challenge is that we're always going from one potential tragedy to the next potential tragedy to the next potential tragedy, and that's what the pandemic brings to us. And it is challenge and hurdle after challenge and hurdle. And so now one of the hurdles may be that there may be certain communities that will become even more underserved in terms of emergency response capabilities. And that just fact makes our public health message that much more important, our outreach that much more important. And so it just continually escalates the public health centric approach we have been taking throughout this pandemic. And so, you know, it's just, you know, it is, I mean, it's just a head shaker always when it comes to what we are dealing with. And, you know, I appreciate all of the first responders, law enforcement, fire, medical, ambulance. You know, we can't be without them. And so this is just something we're going to have to figure out as we move forward.
I appreciate that, County Manager. I really do appreciate your pragmatic approach, our sheriff's wisdom, and certainly our public health director's guidance throughout this. We have been very well served by the leadership here in Clatsop County throughout. And I know that there is one challenge after another, and we have to navigate these as best we can. But I think we've done we have done the best we can, and I do appreciate this discussion this evening, and I think that we will be having more of them as we continue on. But any other comments, questions? I would thank you, Director Lalich, for public health update this evening, and we'll move forward. Yep, thank you. Next item is the proclamation, which is the National Hispanic Heritage Month proclamation on page 96. And do we have anyone to present on this? Consejo Español, I see, is here. Minerva?
Yes, hi, how are you, everybody? I'm just here to accept the proclamation, and we are very honored to be here tonight and hearing all these comments about COVID. This is, oh my gosh, less important to all the importance of the COVID, but we are here to support you and we are here to help, and I really appreciate what you are doing about the recognition of this proclamation.
Thank you very much, Minerva. And this is very important. I'm glad that we're able to do this proclamation this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You want me to read? Okay, thank you.
What we'll do is we'll take a vote.
Okay.
Approve the proclamation, and then we'll go ahead, and if you would like to read it, you're certainly welcome to do so. Let's go ahead, and I'll ask the commission if we can take do we have a motion on this?
Mr. Chair, it'd be my honor to move to approve the resolution and order proclaiming September 15th, 2021 through October 15th, 2021 to be National Hispanic Heritage Month, and authorize the chair to sign and then read the proclamation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution and order proclaiming September 15th, 2021 through October 15th, 2021 to be National Hispanic Heritage Month, and to authorize the chair to sign, then read the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, Minerva, I'll turn it over to you to read the proclamation.
Okay, thank you so much. From September 15 through October 15 is celebrating National Hispanic Heritage Month. It traditionally honors the culture and the contribution of both Hispanic and Latino Americans as celebrate heritage rooted in Latin American countries. During this period, month and through the year, share the history, heritage, and accomplishments of the Hispanic and Latino American of past and present. Hispanic readers, okay, I think that's it.
Okay, fantastic. I'll go ahead, and we've got something in our packet here. We've got the resolution in order, and I will go ahead and read that, Minerva.
Please, thank you.
In the matter of proclaiming the period from September 15th, 2021 through October 15th, 2021 to be National Hispanic Heritage Month, whereas the term Hispanic or Latino refers to a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rico, South or Central American or other Spanish culture or origin, who can be of any race, any ancestry, or any ethnicity. And whereas the United States has always drawn its strength from the contributions of a diverse people, and whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month is a time to recognize the contributions made and the important presence of Hispanic and Latino Americans to the United States, and whereas Hispanic Americans have played a prominent and important role in our national heritage, and our Hispanic American residents lift up our communities and our economy as entrepreneurs, executives, and small business owners. And whereas a significant segment of the more than 40,000 people living in Clatsop County are Hispanic, and whereas we honor the rich heritage of our Hispanic community, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Clatsop County does hereby proclaim September 15th, 2021 through October 15th, 2021 as National Hispanic Heritage Month in Clatsop County. And we call upon public officials, educators, and all residents to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs to share in this special annual tribute by learning and celebrating the generations of Hispanic and Latino Americans who have positively influenced and enriched our nation and society. Dated this 22nd day of September 2021. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minerva.
Thank you, everybody.
Next item is business from the public. And this is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda except public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the board, are any members of the public registered to speak?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. All had an opportunity to review the consent calendar. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Is there a motion?
I think someday we should all get a ride on some of this big fun equipment, but John's probably already done it, so he doesn't need it, the rest of us. Mr. Chair, if I could move adoption of the consent calendar, please.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion approved. We will move on to the commissioner liaison reports. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm going to start out with an apology because I spoke with Commissioner Webb today about the AOC District 7 meeting, and she came to it. I did not call each one of you, my colleagues, and say, AOC District 7 is meeting. I mean, I kind of did it in passing. I didn't say, please show up so you can meet your colleagues, get acquainted, learn about each other, and overcome COVID as a county commissioner. I should have done that. I apologize. Sorry. So we met for 4.5 hours to talk with all of the commissioners from Columbia, Commissioner Webb and myself. The county manager, Tracy Kravenko, was on the call as well, the Tillamook County commissioners and the Lincoln County commissioners. We talked about our hot topics. You can look at those on the agenda. They're no news to you. We heard the reports from AOC about what they're up to. We heard the reports about what AOC can do for us. We heard reports from our stakeholders and our partners in this. And Commissioner Webb has 4 pages of notes. I was busy listening to people, so she was the good person who took notes. She's promised to get those together in the next few days and pass them on to us, and for that I'm grateful. That we're part of a community of commissioners and working together with each other regionally and with AOC, and it's just really a blessing and a joy. So we're doing that together. And next time, please y'all come, if only for whatever space of time you can clear. I mentioned to the group that we in Clatsop County are one of only 2 counties in Oregon that have volunteer county commissioners. So that the 3 of you have not only jobs, you all have young children. You know, that's a lot. So your public service is extremely valued, and however we can get together to collaborate, it's also useful. So there's that. Commissioner I don't know if we've talked about this much, but Commissioner Heimiller from Columbia County is chair of both COLPAC, our regional economic development entity, and Northwest Act. I'm his vice chair, our vice chair. So Commissioner Heimiller is going on vacation and hopes to be back in time to address the Oregon Transportation Commission. In the meantime, I'll be carrying the water for our region so that we can talk to them about what we need. I'm also participating in the selection of the area ODOT manager for Region 2. So that's an important kind of outward-looking, collaborating thing to do. I mentioned the part about the state making noises, state legislators making noises about how they want to collect our public health departments and decide how things will be done. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that we can do something about that. We're all aware that redistricting is going on. When I saw the plans, I didn't expect to have a big impact. But all I can say is if they take Senator Johnson away from us, that's a huge loss for this region. And it's, I don't know how we fix that, but we adapt. We're at the fuzzy end of that lollipop, colleagues. That's how that works. Whatever is true, we'll deal with it. The other thing is I've been thinking a lot about collaboration and good listening. I think I mentioned I had a long conversation with Cheryl Johnson, a longtime community land use and I want to say public policy activist in Detroit, Michigan, where I came from. They said, oh, the church ladies run things. Well, there are civic equivalents to that, but the people who come to the committee meetings year after year, decade after decade, she was part of the initial deliberations, the regional deliberations to develop the comp plan, and now she's back again. How do we collect the wheat from those skilled, long-time, committed community activists who want to participate to good governance? How do we separate the chaff of those who want to hyper-politicize the process for, I don't know, ego needs or self-aggrandizement or basically making war on other kinds of people that they define? So I think that's what I see as our task, to have a community engagement process that brings out the best from people, that helps people collaborate and find common ground and work together. Because I'll tell you, the stuff I've done around land use with short-term rentals and the complaint system and recognition of community organizations, I got to tell you, I feel like a failure. I think it's backfired because I think it's been weaponized and used to basically to wage war, neighbor against neighbor, and to lose track of how we work together as communities. That's not everything that's happened, but again, there's wheat and there's chaff. How do we have good community engagement? And I want to end by a shout out to Hannah Mather. If you have not gone to the new county website, it's beautiful. I'm telling you, it's beautiful and it's functional. I have used it. I've loved it. I haven't gone through the whole thing. I'm not that kind of nerd, but I was able to find recordings of community meetings and listen to things that really broke my heart, but I could find them on the website. So Hannah, thank you for everything you do so beautifully to help us do good community engagement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. We'll go to Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, I've been horizontal for the last few weeks, so I don't have a lot to report other than to give a shout out to Commissioner Thompson for the job that she did in the Region 7 meeting on Monday. She manages to make everybody feel respected and honored, and also runs a hell of an efficient meeting. And we stayed on target 4.5 hours. Let me tell you, is a long time for a sick person. And she was just fantastic. I would always encourage commissioners to do whatever you can with AOC. They gave a, I don't know how many of you have had the time or the will to read through AOC's legislative report, but it's always a highlight in my life because it really, it puts a wonderful, wonderful perspective and just a lot of very, very good data about what happened in the session. And at this meeting, we were able to have their K Street people report on sort of the big issues in each of their areas of responsibility, and it was really useful. It was also very useful to hear AOC staff and I guess Melissa Cribbins, who is the president of AOC, talk about the disconnects in AOC, which have, and it's the urban-rural divide, and that often hampers, as a progressive, it hampers my ability to go with a lot of the AOC initiatives, but it got a thorough airing, and it was really nice to hear other commissioners. It's my favorite thing about these regional meetings is that we get to hear from other commissioners about what's working and what's not working in their counties, and it's just incredibly useful. And so anyway, thank you, Commissioner Thompson, for you are a rock star in that role. That's all I've got, and I think I'm going to have to leave this meeting. I'm sorry. I'm running out of voice and everything, and stamina and everything else. So I'm really sorry. Blessings on you all.
Yeah, Commissioner Webb, please take care of yourself. I know you haven't been feeling well, so get some good rest, and we'll be happy to have you back. See you soon. Commissioner Toyoka.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, Commissioner Webb, get better. I just had two issues I just wanted to speak about for a liaison report, and one is, I guess, echoing redistricting on the state level. I liken it to our Clatsop County redistricting when, we've discussed it, and we've all taken the position as apolitical. We're nonpartisan. And I think it was effective discussion and interpretation. We talked about, maintaining communities, roads, access, easeway, all the proper things in redistricting. And then I look at the state level one, and I just see the opposite. It's tearing communities apart, and it is creating a larger rural-urban divide. So as and I've talked, Donna, county manager, about the formal letter to the state, and as well as just bringing it up to my fellow commissioners and just anyone in our community. I think should speak out against that it should be an apolitical process. It should be more about, services about communities, not about politics. And when they talk about redistricting. So, I know it's a pet peeve, but it's still, I think it's something that we need to work towards. And not that I'm biased, but I think Clatsop County did a very good job as far as, the discussions and the direction for redistricting here locally. And I just wish you would take that same direction in the state level. The other item I have is, I guess, more of a partisan topic to me, but I'm bringing it to the board and our community. Is lately this, the House of Representatives and Ways and Means Committee, they proposed a $4,500 tax credit for for EV electric vehicles. And all sounds wonderful, but I think I don't appreciate the content of the proposal, because what as drafted, it excludes 49 of the 54 electric vehicle models on the market. It's very pointed towards certain manufacturers and only union fully assembled vehicles. I think if they were truly a genuine proposal to support American jobs and clean technology, it would have been a universal tax credit towards all EVs. I think the fact that they pointed it towards only certain vehicles makes it a disingenuous portion to that proposal. And I believe I would like to speak out, and I would like to have fellow commissioners read this and provide support that it should be a unilateral, because if we are talking about clean energy and U.S. jobs, it should be unilateral, not pointed towards any specific group or identity. And I believe everything starts at the local level, works its way up. I believe good governance starts locally and goes up. It doesn't come top down, it goes bottom up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. So you're going to share that with the rest of, okay. Rest of the commission? Thank you. Commissioner Banks?
Yeah, I have, I guess, 4 things. First, I didn't really know that I was going to talk about this, but Commissioner Toyoka, I would really love to read that, because I do also agree with you in when we're approaching a topic that it should be, unilateral. So I look forward to reading that. Secondly, Leanne or Commissioner Thompson, thank you so much for attending all of the AOC meetings that you do. You are a solid and consistent representation for us as a county, and I do know that you try to tread the fence line on both sides with grace and just with your continued experience, and I appreciate it, especially being that often my life is what 2 other commissioners are in my boat of working and children, and so I love that we have that consistent representation at the AOC level. Thirdly, I received an email from Extension, and I was just going to offer this invitation to you, fellow commissioners, but we have a new Extension director joining us starting September 30th. He is scheduling meetings with commissioners. He would love to meet with us as a board, but that if we find that we are under a time constraint, that we can also just meet with me as the extension liaison. So I wanted to extend the invitation to you all, but with the idea that if you find that your time is not available, then I will go ahead and be the liaison for that meeting. Gracious. Oh, the one thing I did want to share was something that actually was really fun in my classroom, and Leanne knows, or Commissioner Thompson knows a little bit about it. So I did a science lab with my high school students here this last week, and it involved masks and the question, do they work? And knowing that masks do work, it was a fun experiment for these kids. Because they were actually able to visually see it in their Petri dishes that masks do work. They stationed their Petri dishes 3 feet away, and we definitely social distanced the children in different areas of the building alone. And some of them talked to their dish for a minute straight with and without a mask. Some coughed on their dish with and without a mask. Some tried to sneeze, but apparently you can't make yourself sneeze on command. And so that was a fun adventure for these kids. But I just wanted to share, kind of a little bright spot, because I'm a bit of a science nerd, and these kids really embraced this process because, as we all know, everyone comes down on different sides of the spectrum when it comes to opinion. But to see it actually in front of them, scientifically proven, even though, it wasn't in an actual real life science lab, we were able to simulate a rudimentary experiment, and these kids really embraced it. And so I just wanted to share because it was fun and I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Sounds like a great experiment. I'm glad you were able to do that. It's good to visualize those things. I don't have anything. I will go ahead and turn it over to our county manager.
Chair Quayle and members of the board, thank you. I just want to remind that on Friday at 10 o'clock a.m., we'll be having the first town hall meeting on short-term rentals. And, part of what I think the board and certainly staff will be interested in is really looking at the short, medium, and longer term mechanisms that might be and might prove fruitful as we look at the policy issues around short-term rentals, because with short-term rentals, because of the complexities of the property rights and the takings issues, it's going to take short, medium, and long-term strategies. And so we look forward to those conversations, and then obviously conversations with the board as we learn more from from the residents. I did want to mention Colpack and the broadband action team that Commissioner Thompson is involved with. There's a regional initiative which is really complementary to the work that we're doing out in the Juule, Elsie, Vine Maple area, but it's really a longer term look at the broadband infrastructure. And this is really the hard infrastructure that is not a 1 year fix. It's usually a 5 to 10 year fix because you're dealing with the hard side of fiber. But there is a project that's going on through Colpack, so it's Washington, Tillamook, Columbia, and Clatsop County to bring in a consultant to really look at the middle mile and the final mile and come up with some strategies. And so we did receive a request from Colpack to have the county contribute $25,000 to this effort. Each of the counties would be providing the same amount. And so this was part of the set aside that we had out of the ARPA dollars for the broadband. So I just wanted to mention that to you. It's actually an exciting project. It is complementary, but it is a little different focus than what the Elsie Juule Vine Maple project is. And then finally, I just wanted to mention redistricting. Commissioner Toyoka mentioned it at the state level. We will be sharing, I will be sharing some draft district maps with board members as we meet every week, and then we'll have a work session, I believe, on October 6th. If Monica can nod for me, I think that's the date, where we'll share those more publicly. I just want to introduce some of the options to the board members prior to really sending them out publicly. But there'll be a number of options. Then we'll go through a community engagement process to get community input on those options. So that process is moving forward. And I think that's all that I have right now. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, County Manager. Any questions for our County Manager? And we can move right on into the rest of the agenda here. We have a public hearing this evening. The public hearing is on Ordinance 21-04, which is the LADUC Article 4 amendments on page 120. And I will go ahead and ask for the staff report. I believe that will be our Community Development Director, Gail Henriksen, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Chair. This item was brought to the board back in May of this year as a work session item. And the background on it is in December of last year, the board adopted Ordinance 20-03, which combined our Land and Water Development and Use Ordinance and our standards documents into the new document called the LADUC, or Land and Water Development and Use Code. The intent of combining the two documents was simply to merge existing regulations together, make everything easier to find, easier to use, both for the public, contractors, residents, and staff. What we found out after the consolidation is that by bringing things together that had previously been in disparate locations, people were making different interpretations of the code, which was not the intent of what we wanted to do. So we contacted County Council, who advised us to bring this to a work session, which we did, advised us to get the changes done as soon as possible, which we have done. And we are proposing to go back to the original text that was in the Land and Water Development and Use Ordinance. We will reformat it, obviously, to fit our new format. We did also correct grammatical and spelling errors, made some updates to titles of people who are approving things in the document, and renumbered and brought the citation references up to date. Again, our intent is not to change any regulations, and I want to be very clear that while we went through this odd adjustment period, we did not hold up permits. We did not deny permits because of the changes in interpretation. So I just want to make sure the public is aware of that as well. As staff, we are recommending that you do conduct the first reading of Ordinance 2104, open the public hearing and take public testimony, and then continue the matter to October 13th. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Director Henriksen? Okay, if none, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Clerk of the board, are any members of the public registered to speak?
No, there are not.
Okay, we don't have anybody to speak. That means we don't need any responses. Do we have any discussion from the members of the commission? Motion.
So it would,
I didn't get that.
oh.
Go ahead, Commissioner Toyoka.
I would move that the board conduct the first reading of Ordinance 21-04 by title only and continue the matter to October 13th, 2021.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded that the board conduct the first reading of ordinance number 21-04 by title only and continue the matter to October 13th, 2021. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. County Council, Joanna, can we have the first reading by short title only?
Absolutely. An ordinance amending Article 4 of the Clatsop County Land and Water Development and Use Code.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Next is the appointment to the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee. It's on page 429. And is this our Assistant County Manager? Nope.
I think that was me. I thought that was emergency management.
It is, if Tiffany is not on, Chair Coyle, I'll just go ahead.
Go ahead.
And give staff report. Currently, the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee has one vacant position, and the staff right now is recommending the appointment of Shannon Berry, MD, to fill that vacant position at this time.
Any questions? If not, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the ASAA Committee's recommendation to appoint Shannon Berry, MD, to the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the ASAA Committee's recommendation to appoint Shannon Berry, MD, to the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. That's the approval of the intergovernmental agreement with Juule School District for funding and support of the Juule Internet Connectivity Enhancement Project on page 435. And I'll refer to our county manager.
Chair Coyle, members of the board, unfortunately, I won't be as brief on this agenda item as I was on the previous one. You know, this story kind of goes back prior to the pandemic, but certainly took on a much greater light as we saw what the impacts were on both education, social media, telehealth, and it's shown a light on the areas of the county that are really underserved in terms of internet access. And one of those that is most underserved was identified through the Northwest ESD as the Juule LC Vine Maple area. So with the assistance of Commissioner Thompson and a consultant and staff and interested community members, we got a group together to really problem solve this issue. And so, to the credit of the Joule School District and specifically Superintendent Phillips, they stood up to the occasion and decided to take a leadership role and have been working steadfastly since to really come up with a solution that is both affordable, but it is also going to make a big impact in terms of both the reliability and the performance of the internet in that area. So what they've come up with is a strategy to really install wireless towers in various strategic places throughout the school district boundaries. These towers will be owned by the school district, as will all of the equipment on them. And then there will be an internet service provider who will then address all the customer side of the service. These cat towers will also be available as a secondary benefit for other public safety related infrastructure, whether it's radios and other communications. So there's a 3-phase project plan that the school district has developed. We're only talking about phase 1, which really serves the largest group of Joule students and families. And once phase 1 is done, then we will assess whether or not the performance of the system meets expectations and figure out how to pursue phase 2 and phase 3. So Joule School District is a financial partner with us. They'll be contributing 1/3 of the cost of the first phase, and Clatsop County through the ARPA monies would be funding 2/3 of that. The money is part of the set aside that the staff has presented as part of the ARPA draft funding strategy. And so it will be, roughly 500,000 out of 1.3 million that's been set aside so far. We did approach this project with the idea of it potentially being replicated in other parts of the county on an as-needed basis. And so as we go through this, there will be the ability to then replicate it if we can verify and validate that it's working. So that's what we're asking, is that the board approve an intergovernmental agreement with school district to allocate the $500,000 for phase 1. If phase 1 goes above what the budgeted estimate is, the county's contribution is limited to the 500,000. If it turns out to be less, we are limited to the 2/3 funding proportion. And so I think that this is sticking our toe in, and I think we are very hopeful that this will make a difference. The estimated, performance is at the 1 gig level, which is far beyond what anyone is receiving there now. So that's what is being proposed by staff, and I'm happy to answer any questions that your board might have.
Any questions of our county manager? If not, I'm sure that Commissioner Thompson would like to.
I'm rising in my seat. So I move that the Board of Commissioners approve the intergovernmental agreement with Jules School District to allocate $500,000 to phase 1 of the Joule Internet Connectivity Enhancement Project and authorize the board chair to sign.
Second.
All those okay, we'll go ahead and reread the motion. Requested action: the Board of Commissioners approve the IGA with Joule School District to allocate $500,000 to phase 1 of the Joule Internet Connectivity Enhancement Project and authorize the board chair to sign the agreement as amended. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Fantastic.
And Mr. Chair, may I speak for just a moment? Would you indulge
absolutely.
me? So thank you. I mean, this is so exciting because now we can do this, I hope, all around Clatsop County where it's needed. So we can reinvent our economy and our educational system and our healthcare and all of the things that we care about. If anybody listening is interested, this was a long board packet. Look on page 444 of the board's packet and 445, 46, and 47 if you want the specific geographic particulars. This is how the sequencing is contemplated only if it works in a way that's fiscally responsible. And for the work of the staff, I am so grateful for the support and understanding of my colleagues as we look at what we can do all over Clatsop County. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Yes, hopefully this can be a model that can be replicated. Great job. We'll move on to approve participation in Association of Oregon Counties County Solutions Water Needs Forums, page 450. And County Manager.
Chair Cuello, members of the board, as part of our membership in AOC and really part of AOC's ongoing role is to really figure out how to provide relevant and timely services to the counties on some really important topical areas. And one of those that they have identified as a nexus between their capacity and the county's needs is on water issues. And so they have put together a program that really allows us to invest some of our ARPA dollars into a project with the goal of better understanding the county's water needs. And they're really focusing on 12 counties. Clatsop County is one of those 12 counties, as well as Tillamook, Columbia, and many others. But the idea is to have local stakeholder groups, local expertise to come together under the co-convening of the County Board of Commissioners and AOC, and to have a process to identify these water needs. This will then really provide information for the next steps of some water dialogue, water studies, water discussion, and will also play in likely to the legislative session and some funding to help support counties as we tackle water. Obviously, water is very important to the economy. It's really important to viability of our communities, and so we will need the state's help as we do this. And so we believe that this process will be a really important first step. So what staff is asking is that the Board of Commissioners approve participation in the AOC Water Needs Forum and authorize a contribution of $25,000 from the ARPA funds. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions for our County Manager? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Oh,
I see Commissioner Toyoka had his hand up there. Commissioner Toyoka?
Yes, and I apologize for my location, but just one comment, more than not really a question for the county manager, but Commissioner Banks and I were just finished up our county college experience, and this was one of the topics towards the end of our group discussions in my breakout group. And I think the key component the county manager alluded to is that the panels, that the discussions are relative to local stakeholders. And I think that is a very key component when they're discussing the water issues. It's not some, distant discussion. It's actually, relevant individuals within the communities who are key stakeholders who are included in the discussion. That's what I believe makes it most relevant. So thank you.
Good point, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Thompson?
Oh, I loved what he said. So here's what makes this really, in my mind, a superior product. The governor had a 100-year look at water. It was state centralized, top down, and the opposite of what Commissioner Toyoka just alluded to. This is our chance to empower our local stakeholders to be heard under our convening capacity And AOC has allies in the legislature to move this forward on both sides of the aisle. So what we've got is a win-win product for a pretty small initial investment for something that's essential to life. We can't overestimate the importance of water. So unless Commissioner Bangs has a comment, I'd like to make the motion. Okay, you're ready. Okay. I move that the Board of Commissioners approve participation in AOC Water Needs Forum and authorize a contribution of $25,000 from ARPA funds.
Second.
Moved and seconded, the Board of Commissioners approve participation in Water Needs Forum and authorize a contribution of $25,000 from ARPA funds. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We don't have any other items on the agenda. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order tonight?
It's just a joy that we are doing practical, pragmatic, on the ground, making a difference for people in Clatsop County. It's really very satisfying. Colleagues, thank you for the pleasure.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Yes, I agree. Very satisfying. And if we don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening.